Hello again. As of the writing of this, the art for my new science fiction visual novel, Volt, is half done. As art is the biggest thing to do, it means I'm making good progress as well. October will be a packed month for sure, as I expect to release a number of smaller videos. For now though, I will cap off September with another short one for you folks. Once again, a big thanks to the patrons who make this all possible, and please consider subscribing here and or supporting me on Patreon if you don't already. With that out of the way, let's get to the main thing of today, more applied mechanical design. So, having completed my big Wipeout series, I naturally began considering what next to approach. I now had some good practicing work with Armored Core 6's interface and design, so I pretty quickly started thinking of what I could do with that in addition. The obvious thing which I was rolling around was using the designs in a commercial format, a way of practicing motion graphics and composition. A way to show the designs in motion and action. In general, I really like making trailers and short, tight little projects, and so the idea got into my head. Make some cool mechs, record them, then do some short trailer/commercial type spots using them. A hybrid project to really test a lot of my skills. This then became relatively easy. All I needed was a subject that fit those requirements. Now let's see, a series with cool graphic design, with only a handful of distinct visual factions, ideally with high contrast between them, something I was familiar with. Oh, yes, yeah, of course. It was kind of obvious in retrospect. Ace Combat 3 Electrosphere was a perfect fit. It already meshed well with the Wipeout series by alignment of both the original games having killer graphic design. Beyond that, the fact that Ace Combat games are mecha stories was, they just happen to use jets instead of humanoid robots, also made the work fit quite well. For this series, then, I would set up the same template and format. First, simplify and condense the identity of the faction. Build an AC design to match that. Color the design. Apply detailing and logo designs. After that, fill in any additional elements that are needed. So, remaking existing branding and also creating new branding to flesh it out. Once the AC design itself was all done, it was then time to record and edit it into a short, sub 30-second, snappy trailer/commercial thing. Each of these would also need to reflect the character of the faction in question as much as possible. But that said, one thing I did use in this project, which I don't have now, is Reshade. What is Reshade? Well, I had no idea, as I hadn't really used it before. It's basically a way of modifying how the video game displays itself when you play it. A lot of people use it to adjust the now very heavy amounts of modern post-processing and visual effects games use. Stuff like lighting, color, shadows, anti-aliasing, so on and so on. These all impact performance and visuals, and so, messing with that stuff can help a lot. Now the main reason I used it was for the No HUD ability, which removed the interface and left the glorious mecha action to play out impressively. Beyond that, I hate to break it to you, but Reshade, it just does a lot of stuff I can already mostly do in After Effects anyways. It was neat to experiment with, to push myself in a new direction, but it was also a bitch to install and uninstall, so I'm not sure how much I'm going to use it in the future. Especially when the benefits for me as a video editor person are marginal at best. So let's get to the main stuff. For each of the 4 sections, I'll show you my thought process on how I made the AC, did the graphic design, did the video design, and how it all came together. Beginning with Neucom. I started here for a few reasons. 1, Neucom's visuals are striking and immediately iconic when thinking of AC3. 2, they were a good test of a lot of what I had practiced in doing in the various Wipeout designs as well. If the whole idea was too much to deal with and I stopped this side project, I at least wanted to nail Neucom's. As Neucom's jets are also exotic, I knew the designs as well had to embody that exotic aspect. They were the organic and futuristic designs of AC3, and it's clear from a lot of the early concept work, kind of the driving idea of AC3's future. When thinking of jets, I went with the obvious choice of the visually eye-catching Delphinus series. With this in mind, I went for a mix of Lammergeier and Noctrier parts. A fast, futuristic, lightweight design similar to Icarus from the previous series. For colors, I stuck with the white, blue, light blue, and orange Neucom look. It's that eye-popping, contrasting color mix we humans seem to love looking at. Now for the head in particular, I was tempted to go with the VE44A, as it mimics the vertical stabilizer in the Delphinus. But instead, I opted for the Lammergeier head. Why? Now it's not really because it looks like any of the AC-3 jets in particular, not even really the Night Raven. It's mainly because it kind of looks like a Y2K period-appropriate CD player actually, like a weird Walkman model of some kind. It's sleek and small and just kind of fits a bit better. Now when it came to do the logos, I had a real blast. Neucom's logos are all really great. From there, the in-universe AC3 commercial also gave me the striking "Power for Life" tagline as well. With the core visual identity in place, I then got around to doing the branding of the individual companies within the Neucom conglomerate. Of course, the private military branch of Neucom Emergency Unit, as well as remaking the Neucom Chemical and Nanobyte Nanomachine branding. From there, I also created some new original brands to kind of fit the mech angle a bit better. For Neucom Heavy Industries, the simplified stylish N of Neucom, with some bolts kind of around it, created a sleek Thunderbolt-like rounded organic design. Really, the only continuous aspect of Neucom's logos are kind of just that they're orange and they have that organic kind of Y2K rounded futurist look. For the name itself, instead of the bulky kanji, I took a page out of the Japanese branding and converted the phonetics into katakana. This lended itself well to some stylish, kind of slanted font. I mean, after all, we're going to the future. Of course, the letters need to be itchy to go forward as well. For one more new design, I thought about a kind of in-zaibatsu Neucom mecha company that would be a good fit. Neucom Man Machine is what I came up with, naming it after the interface of which ENSI is a type, with a nested organic oval humanoid representing the pilot and the machine. When you cut off the end of both titles, it becomes sleekly New Man, which felt suitably futuristic. As a few last decals, I replicated a coffin cockpit and the great AC3 ENSI logo. The human neural interface which let the pilots in that game, and also ironically, the characters in Armored Core 6, mesh with their machines directly. So naturally, I added a little robot. Now, once again, I ran into the neutral spacing issue, especially on the curvy organic Lammergeier core. But I think I did okay enough. The big Neucom N shows off what I mentioned last time as well, about how you can sidestep the lack of neutral space by using more of the machine as a template. The legs as well were much better for this. For the loadout, I think the dual pulse missiles and laser drones fit the vibe best, but the dual Sampu pistol and laser dagger also kept a lot of the sleekness while being a little more viable. With the subject done, it was time to make the commercial. For this one, I kinda let the identity of each brand do its own thing, tapping into a very late 90s, early 2000s visual design. The playful magnifying glass of Nanobyte or the screws of Neucom Heavy Industry. I practiced fluid fill for Neucom Chemical, and I went with an excited, active AC3 soundtrack, and in the end I think it kind of really came together and I knocked this one out of the park.
Innovation for life. Technology for life. Advancement for life. The Delphin 6 from Neucom. Powered for life. Neucom.
General resource. Okay, so now up front I want to address something that I don't think I've mentioned before. It is just general resource, not general resources. But my English-speaking brain just finds that really weird. So I know there isn't supposed to be an S, it's just supposed to be general resource. But it's like they own a lot of companies, so the singular kind of thing. Listen, I just, I subconsciously kept adding it. So just, you have to kind of accept it, sorry. For the antagonist of Neucom, I wanted to play up the contrast a lot. Where Neucom was the plucky, cool, young, sleek Macintosh computers, General Resource is the arrogant, bloated IBM. It owns everything, and it knows it. For the build, I began with a variation of the Oricom kind of protag default. the Shade Eye head, Melander legs with the Basho arms for their flat square shoulders, and the VP40S core for a bit of sleekness. When it came to the colors, I mainly looked at the AC3, GR, F22, and F15 variants. For a payload, a missile-heavy back and railgun explosive thrower shield make a good profile. I think I also tried the Vulcans as well at some point, kind of making an allusion to AC3's aircraft origins. The main palette of the machine is muted gray, blue-gray, washed-out cyan, and a touch of stronger blue. To fit with the more conventional militaristic theme, I also used the big diamond part camo. Altogether, it came to a pretty good point where I kind of isolated a few areas, kind of like the front of the knees, for a non-camo base. Now here, we also have to get to the branding. The main GR logo was easy enough, but there was a problem. GR has no set tagline. Or rather, it doesn't really have one tagline. Rewatching the AC3 commercials, the pleasant, very Japanese Zaibatsu advertising simply says a number of lines instead. About being out there with you every day, and so on and so on. But it wasn't concise. I wanted something more concrete, something that I could do as a little decal, something more direct to GR's identity. Rearranging the pieces of the wording, I arrived at Our Everywhere Future Era. It fit. It was big, arrogant, and still somewhat self-assured and optimistic about the future. As with last time, I redid the main logo and private defense branch of GR's company, the General Resource Defense Forces. From there, I need to make a lot more specific branding, which AC3 didn't provide. Now what I did notice and wanted to carry on is the repeating star or aster element of the GR designs and their logos. That and the repeated use of cool blues. To begin with, another heavy industry company naturally, this one being a bit visually inspired by the Shinohara Heavy Industries logo from Padlemmer. After that, an orbital space transport or hyperspace gate company to bridge the proverbial gap to Rubicon. Once again, the repeating star of GR might be representing the Sol system, and the arrow of transport passing the orbits of other stars or planets. For the GR version of Neucom's Met Company, a technical and bureaucratic research institute, fit well. The G and R of the name becoming the arm and leg of a machine. And for the last bit, well, how could I resist not making the IBM thing? The last few decals I did were another stylish coffin cockpit decal and a GR mercenary tailcode style insignia. Now, once again, yeah, it's the neutral space issue. I really wanted to use some of these little, they kind of look like radar dishes on the chest. But no, you can't put decals there. So, the low-vis version on the upper chests kind of ended up being a bit crowded. But I think on the side of the right leg it worked a lot better. It gives off a good Lockheed Martin multi-billion-dollar project to design a better killing machine, kind of team logo feel. Now onto the video. Here I used some Reshade to get some of those cool tinted, almost Armored Core 2 kind of vibrant inverted color sequences. Once again, letting the individual branding do its own thing. The bigger important aspect was nailing the vast, kind of war memorial-like wall of companies GR owns. I'd never used After Effects cylinder projection before, and this was a good practice. For the OST, I went with Yukikaze's because it was a more subdued kind of vibe. GR as a company is big, rich, old, and fat, so something kind of calm, confident, but still exerting a certain amount of pride. For backing footage, I pulled on the same kind of generic scenery of waves, and on a certain very specific late 90s SF film for some nice hyperspace gate footage and crowded kind of futuristic cityscapes. It's not as nice as Neucom, but it's the future your Windows 98 grandma could see on the TV.
There for you in everyday life. Ushering in a new era with you. Building a better future with you. We're out there every day and with you today. The MFA 36 game active. Our everywhere future era.
General Resources. UPEO. This would require a big pivot. The Universal Peace Enforcement Organization is an offshoot of the new United Nations Special Armed Response Force. So you have to ditch all the Corpo branding and embrace instead my very big folder of white-painted United Nations forces. It's bureaucratic, it's more authoritative, it's a unification of bureaucracy and governments. The go-to here was a design made out of scraps and not really built for cutting edge. As in-game in AC3 they used second-hand jets, an AC which didn't look too cutting edge was the go-to here. The sleek but simple VP-44S head, the large Mind Alpha body, it would be contrasted with the smaller Alba arms and legs, making a silhouette that got visually smaller away from the main body. Nimble, but not aggressive or kind of enforcive. For the colors, the UPEO uses an absolutely pacified mix of white with extremely washed out beige, cyan, and a touch of dark gray and black, but never anything too bold. From here the branding was tricky and would require some creativity. For a base, the bold dark UN was a must. The change from United to Universal Nations in line with AC3 worked well to explain the design's presence on an alien world. Remaking the SARF and UPEO logos was rough, but I did okay enough, I feel. The big creative one was in wanting a fourth branding of some kind. I thought nothing fit the Hyper-UN better than a dedicated UN peacekeeping mission acronym, based on the real missions to Rwanda and the Balkans. After all, the arrival of the Planetary Closure Administration in-game is already kind of this anyways, right? This then left the loadout. Now I love me, in AC3, the heavy cannon weapon, so the big attaché autocannon felt solid. AC3 also used a lot of MIRV split missiles, so those were also a good choice. Lastly, for the melee, the most pacifist stun baton felt like kind of the best melee weapon for a peacekeeper. From here, I moved on to the video. Now for this one, it wasn't a corpo commercial in the traditional sense. Like the two previous ones, it would need a different approach. Something kind of grand. The final tagline about, peace and everywhere being an important aspect. For that, I opted for a minimalist infographic style. Using a palette taken from the UPEOs, I would frame it as a kind of humanitarian exclamation, or some kind of piece of education and not a commercial. For music, something big and grandiose to bring across the authoritative feel of the Universal Nations. I went with a track from Giant Robo, The Day the Earth Stood Still, but it still needed something more. In the previous two videos I had done voiceover, but I wanted something different. Then it all kinda snapped in at once. When I thought of the UN, I thought of Peacekeepers. When I think of video game UN and Peacekeepers, I think of Sid Meier's Alpha Centauri. And when I think of SMAC and the UN, I think of High Commissioner Pravin Lal. As luck would have it, not only does SMAC have a secret project for man-machine neural interfaces, it's Commissioner Pravin Lal desperately speaking about how its dangers and the ethical ramifications of surgically altering people. All at once, it all kind of came together. A UN peacekeeping force deployed to Rubicon to combat forced machine interfaces between humans and general human rights violations, deploying the mecha SARF and UPEO to do so.
The Warrior's bland acronym MMI obscures the true horror of this monstrosity. Its inventors promise a new era of genius, but meanwhile unscrupulous power brokers use its forcible installation to violate the sanctity of unwilling human minds. They are creating their own private army of demons. Commissioner Pravin Lal, Report on Human Rights.
Ouroboros. For the final faction, another radical approach was needed. Ouroboros isn't a company, it isn't even an organization in the traditional sense. In Ace Combat 3, Ouroboros is a hacker revolutionary army. A group of people advocating for the abandonment of the physical world by merging human consciousness into the virtual, made up of various rogue elements of a dozen other factions. Not unlike Armored Core 6's third ending route, ironically enough. With this in mind, I pivoted again. For the design, something strange and exotic was again needed. A mix of the Lammergeier arms, the Firmeza legs, and the HAL core, topped with the VP-44D head. Now for the colors, I took advantage of something I wanted to try but hadn't done really anything with before. The iconic Ouroboros jets, like the Night Raven, are all black, but the logo of Ouroboros is bright blue on this kind of black background. So I put it all together. How to make a lighter color pop and be almost bewitchingly bright against the dark background. The trick in question relates to the reflectivity of the material. By making the material very reflective, but using dark black, you obscure the fact that it is reflective until you apply a brighter color, or decal. Then, when light passes over it, the lighter decal pops against the absolute black. I think it turned out great. This then left the weapons and branding. For the build, I opted for a complete glass cannon, something you needed to use perfectly or paid for dearly. A transhumanist perfection. An all-in energy build where if you land everything, you can do pretty insane damage, but if you whiff, you get punished hard. The energy aspect meshing well with the fact that the Night Raven has this kind of exotic weaponry all of itself. Now, for the branding though, there wasn't any. Beyond the Ouroboros logo, it's not a company, so I would pivot again as with the UN design. Instead of brands, I would make logos which embody the transhumanist upload of the soul angle that the Ouroboros faction used as a whole, making allusions to alchemical symbology, digital interfacing, biblical allegory, and the electrosphere, and kind of Greek phrasing and imagery. For the USB soul growing out of the ammonite, I was thinking heavily of Ghost in the Shell, and its sequence in the museum. The general idea really being the violation of this primordial ancient relationship between humans and our bodies, casting away the physical for the digital. These were fun as hell to make. Also, as a final detail, the optical neural synaptic interface logo, the step beyond ENSI. With this all complete, it basically left the video aspect. This one I wanted to get pretty wild with, as it was my last in the series. I wanted to channel that late 90s typewriter grunge commercial design, that ugly dark side of the glistening white Y2K which Neucom embodies. Not the Spice Girls, but the Crow. If you know what I mean, you know exactly what I mean. To this end, I used a mix of screen warping, to kind of channel that fisheye lens or CRT-like effect, the use of a lot of noise and digital warping and glitching, evoking these ideas of a hijacking of the system, keeping the color space locked to that dark blacks and neon blue cyans. Audio-wise, this meant layering two of the more haunting AC3 tracks onto one another, the syncopating and chopped up, digitized choral choir and pipe organ, for flashing moments of that primordial biblical illusion and the notion of the fruit of knowledge being the internet and the information sphere, the electrosphere. And to tie it together, one more killer SMAC reference, in that line from the good academician, which nails it.
Life is dynamic. My laws escapades. Hit my life up. I know the militant part of things.
Tasted the fruit.
Well, that was my little AC3, AC6 passion project, part 2. It pushed me in a lot of fun, creative ways, and I had kind of a lot of fun smashing some of my favorite media from that specific time, at the end of the millennium. All that good art together. I hope you enjoyed it. Coming up next month, while I round out my VN, are 2 vids. Really, 2 stories. One relating to Volt on the electromagnetic planet, about the worst criminal in human history, and one kind of all on its own. Well, you'll see soon enough.